A stealth jet designed to be invisible was shot down by a missile designed before the moon landing. The aircraft was a Lockheed F-117 Nighthawk, the first true stealth fighter ever built. Only 59 of them were ever produced. It was one of the most expensive black-budget programs of its era, costing American taxpayers billions of dollars across development and production. The airframe was shaped by Soviet-era mathematics that American engineers had only recently learned to apply. The missile that killed it was an Isaev S-125 Neva, NATO designation SA-3 Goa, a weapon system designed in the late 1950s, fielded in 1961, and considered obsolete by every Western military analyst by the 1990s. It happened once. In the entire combat history of stealth aviation, there has been exactly one confirmed shootdown of a stealth aircraft. It happened at 8:38 p.m. local time on March 27, 1999, near the village of Buđanovci, 40 kilometers west of Belgrade. And most of what we know about how it happened is more interesting than any fiction, because every major detail of it is documented, and the two men involved are still alive. This is Strategic Decoded. We analyze the math behind military decisions using verifiable sources. Every claim in this video is cited in the description. No invented operations, no fabricated numbers, just the public record, and where experts disagree, we say so, and we separate confirmed facts from widely reported claims. If that approach matters to you, subscribe. Drop Vega 31 in the comments if you finish this video. That was the call sign of the F-117 we are about to talk about. To understand how this happened, you have to understand what stealth actually is, because the word is misleading. Stealth is not invisibility. The F-117 was never invisible to radar. What stealth means in engineering terms is a dramatically reduced radar cross-section, the area of the aircraft that bounces radar energy back to the receiver. A normal fighter, for example an F-15, has a radar cross-section measured in single-digit square meters. The F-117 had a radar cross-section often cited as around 0.001 square meters under ideal conditions, roughly the return signature of a small bird. The actual number varies depending on the aspect angle, and some analysts dispute the exact figure. What is not disputed is that it was dramatically smaller than any fighter before it. That reduction was achieved through faceted geometry. The angular, almost folded paper appearance of the F-117 is not aesthetic. Every flat surface was angled to deflect incoming radar energy away from the radar that emitted it, instead of reflecting it back. The black coating was a radar-absorbent material engineered to absorb the small percentage of energy that did hit perpendicular surfaces. To stay stealthy, the aircraft had to remain subsonic. Breaking the sound barrier would produce a sonic boom and heat signatures that would defeat the entire concept. Top cruise speed was in the high subsonic range, around 620 miles per hour. No afterburner. No active radar. It could carry just 2 laser-guided bombs, tucked inside internal weapons bays so they would not ruin the stealth profile. The combined effect was that on a typical Western fire control radar, the kind operating in the X-band around 8 to 12 gigahertz, the F-117 appeared as an object so small that most fire control systems could not reliably track or engage it. The aircraft was not undetectable. Detection and tracking probability was just significantly reduced. That distinction is the thread that ran through the entire Nighthawk's design philosophy. The F-117 was built against a specific set of assumptions about what frequencies enemy radars would use, about how enemy operators would behave, about what the aircraft would be doing in the moments it was most exposed. And it is the thread Colonel Zoltán Dani pulled on. To understand who Dani was, you have to understand the AIR frame he was attacking. The F-117 first flew on June 18, 1981. It entered operational service in October 1983 as the most classified aircraft in American inventory. Its existence was not officially acknowledged until November 10, 1988, 5 years after it was flying combat-ready. It saw its first combat during the 1989 invasion of Panama. In the 1991 Gulf War, 36 F-117 aircraft deployed to the theater, a small fraction of the total coalition force. and flew roughly 1,300 sorties against what the US military described as 1,600 high-value Iraqi targets. Not one F-117 was lost in combat. By the late 1990s, the F-117 had developed an aura of invincibility inside American military planning. 9 years of combat operations across multiple campaigns. No combat losses. Stealth had become, in the minds of NATO planners, a kind of guarantee. That assumption is the reason the F-117 flew that night. On February 21, 1999, 12 Nighthawks had deployed to Aviano Air Base in Italy in support of Operation Allied Force, the NATO bombing campaign aimed at forcing Serbian forces out of Kosovo. On March 27, 1999, weather across the Balkans was poor. Most NATO aircraft were grounded. The EA-6B Prowlers, the electronic warfare platforms that normally jammed enemy radars during F-117 missions, were not flying that night. The F-16 Wild Weasel aircraft that normally hunted enemy surface-to-air missile sites during F-117 strikes were also not flying. Of the entire NATO air component, only 8 F-117s were over Serbia. No escort, no jamming, no suppression. The reasoning was simple. Stealth aircraft did not need protection. Stealth was the protection. On the ground, in a forest 40 kilometers west of Belgrade, was the 3rd Battalion of the 250th Air Defense Missile Brigade of the Army of Yugoslavia, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Zoltán Dani. Dani had spent the previous 15 years studying how Israeli aircraft destroyed Syrian air defenses during the 1982 Lebanon War. In that conflict, Israeli forces destroyed 29 of 30 Syrian surface-to-air missile sites in under 2 hours. The lesson Dani took from it was specific. Static surface-to-air missile batteries die. Mobile batteries survive. So Dani trained his crew to break down their entire SA-3 battery, a system originally designed to be installed and left in place, and loaded onto trucks in under 90 minutes. He moved his battery several times every day. He used radar in extremely short bursts, never more than roughly 20 seconds at a time, to avoid being detected and targeted by NATO anti-radiation missiles. He banned cell phone and radio communication around his unit so that NATO signals intelligence could not geolocate him. He built decoy radars from captured Iraqi MiG-21 components and placed them around his actual position to draw missile fire. Reports also suggest Yugoslav forces had some insight into NATO flight patterns, whether through direct observation of airbases in Italy, through signals intelligence, or through a combination. The exact mechanism remains disputed. What is not disputed is that NATO mission planners, confident in stealth, had been using nearly identical ingress routes. In some cases, the same routes were used night after night. Dani positioned his battery directly along that route and waited. Now, the technical part. This is where most accounts of the shoot-down disagree, and it matters. Dani's SA-3 battery had 2 radars. The first was the SNR-125 fire control radar, the radar that actually guided the missiles. Against conventional aircraft, it was effective. Against the F-117, it was nearly useless. The Nighthawk's faceted geometry was specifically optimized to defeat radars in that frequency range. But Dani's battery also had a second radar. The P-18, NATO designation Spoon Rest D, was a long-wavelength early warning radar operating in the very high frequency band, about 150 MHz. Wavelengths in that range are roughly 2 meters long. This is the critical fact about stealth that the F-117's designers understood, but that the operators flying it had begun to forget. Stealth coatings and faceted geometry work best when the wavelength of the incoming radar is much smaller than the features of the aircraft. Against X-band radar, with wavelengths of about 3 centimeters, the F-117's edges and panels are large enough to deflect the energy efficiently. Against a long wavelength VHF radar, wavelengths measured in meters, the stealth advantage degrades. The aircraft becomes more detectable, even if that detection is too imprecise to guide a missile. That is the core insight. Long wavelengths see stealth differently. That is the physics. Here is what Dani actually did with it. Some sources claim Dani modified his radars to exploit this. Others, including Serbian sources, argue there was no modification and that the modification story was post-war propaganda. Most evidence suggests the equipment was stock, but used in an unusually disciplined and creative way. Either version of the story leads to the same outcome. On the night of March 27th, Dani's battery activated its detection radar twice. Both times, nothing usable. By Yugoslav doctrine, he should have stopped. 2 scans were the operational maximum before relocation. He scanned a third time anyway. What he detected was an F-117 with an unusual radar return, larger than expected. The reason was simple, and it was one of several factors that broke in Dani's favor that night. Stealth aircraft are stealthy when their geometry is intact. The moment any surface breaks the smooth, deflecting shape of the airframe, the radar cross-section spikes. On the F-117, the most significant geometry-breaking event in any sortie was the opening of the bomb bay doors to release weapons. The pilot of Vega 31, Lieutenant Colonel Dale Zelko, had just released 2 laser-guided bombs on a target near Belgrade. His bomb bay doors were open at the exact moment Dani's third radar scan went active. That moment mattered. But it was not the only reason. The predictable flight route was another. The absence of electronic warfare support was another. Dani's disciplined radar tactics were another. Even Dani himself has acknowledged in interviews that timing and luck played a role. Take any one of those factors away and the outcome probably changes. But on that night, all of them aligned. The SNR-125 locked onto the spike. 2 missiles launched within seconds. 6-meter-long V601M rounds closing on Zelko at approximately Mach 3.5. 3.5 times the speed of sound. The first missile passed close enough that Zelko, looking through his cockpit, was surprised the proximity fuse did not detonate. The second missile did detonate, a 154-pound proximity-fused warhead that sprayed roughly 4,500 metal fragments into the air around the aircraft. The blast tore the left wing partially away and sent the F-117 into a violent inverted roll. Zelko later described the negative G-forces as approximately 7 Gs. He has no memory of pulling the ejection handle. His next memory is the cockpit falling away and his parachute opening. The total time from missile impact to canopy inflation was approximately 1.4 seconds. Zelko never even saw the radar that killed him. Vega 31 crashed near Buđanovci. Zelko landed in an irrigation ditch in a plowed field. He activated his PRC-112A handheld survival radio. The next 8 hours were what military planners later described as one of the most successful combat search and rescue operations in modern American history. Yugoslav search parties combed the area. At one point, search teams came within roughly 100 meters of Zelko's hiding position. Local villagers joined the search. By 1 a.m., Serbian television was already broadcasting footage of civilians dancing around the burning wreckage of the aircraft, its tail serial number 82-0806 plainly visible. At 3:38 a.m., 7 hours after the shootdown, an Air Force Special Operations Command rescue package extracted Zelko. 2 MH-53 PAVE-low helicopters and 1 MH-60 PAVE Hawk supported the extraction, and additional fighter cover had been scrambled despite the weather. He returned to flying status within weeks. The F-117 wreckage was not destroyed. The United States military initially planned to send F-15E aircraft armed with AGM-130 missiles to bomb the crash site. The strike was reportedly aborted due to civilians and media presence at the scene. The wreckage was eventually moved to the Museum of Aviation in Belgrade, where significant portions of it, including the cockpit canopy, remain on public display today. Russian intelligence personnel examined the wreckage. According to subsequent reporting, components were also acquired by Chinese intelligence. The data extracted from those components is widely believed to have contributed to Russian and Chinese stealth aircraft programs in the years that followed, potentially including the Sukhoi Su-57 and the Chengdu J-20. How much the wreckage actually mattered to those programs versus parallel domestic research is debated. Now the lessons. This is the part the United States Air Force actually changed. The first thing that changed was tactics. Within days of the shootdown, F-117 mission planning was overhauled. Ingress routes were varied aggressively. Stealth aircraft would no longer fly without electronic warfare escort. SEAD missions, or suppression of enemy air defenses, were timed to coincide with weapon release windows. The complacency of the previous decade was over. The second thing that changed was doctrine. The phrase stealth aircraft are not invisible entered the operational vocabulary of the United States Air Force in a way that it had not existed before March 27, 1999. Going forward, stealth was understood as a statistical advantage, a reduction in detectability that bought you time, range, and surprise, not a guarantee of invulnerability against an adaptive opponent. The third thing that changed was the aircraft. The F-22 Raptor, which entered service in 2005, was designed with a much smaller radar cross-section than the F-117, and a broadband stealth profile more resistant to long wavelength radars. The F-35, which entered service in 2015, incorporated the lessons of the Nighthawk shootdown into both its airframe and its software, including the ability to dynamically manage its own emissions and detect threats much earlier. The B-21 Raider, currently in flight test, is reported to incorporate stealth refinements that draw directly on what was learned from the loss of Vega 31. The F-117 itself was officially retired from combat service in 2008. Most of the surviving airframes remain in long-term storage at the Tonopah test range in Nevada, and a small number have continued flying in research, training, and adversarial roles, visible at air shows and during exercises decades after their official retirement. The Air Force has contracted to keep the type alive through at least 2034. There is a postscript to this story that almost no analytical documentary covers. Years after the shootdown, Dale Zelko and Zoltán Dani met. They corresponded by letter for years before meeting in person in 2011 with their families in Serbia. They became friends. A documentary film called The Second Meeting, directed by Zelko Mirkovic, was made about their reconciliation. The pilot who was shot down and the commander who shot him concluded that they shared a deep professional respect for each other, rooted in the fact that both of them had performed at the absolute limit of their training on that night. Dani returned to civilian life and now runs a bakery in Skorenovac. Zelko retired from the United States Air Force and lives in the United States. So the question that started this video deserves its answer. How does a 1960s missile shoot down the most advanced aircraft of its era? Not by being more sophisticated, not by being faster, not by being more lethal. By being operated by a commander who studied his enemy more carefully than the enemy studied itself. Dani exploited specific design assumptions in the F-117 program, the assumption that bomb bay doors would not be open during a detection window, the assumption that no one would use a long wavelength radar to find a stealth aircraft, the assumption that predictable routes were safe because stealth was the protection. He combined those insights with mobility, discipline, intelligence, and the willingness to break operational doctrine when the situation required it. Stealth did not fail that night. The assumptions behind it did. The lesson of Vega 31 is not that stealth does not work. Stealth works. It worked for the F-117 in 9 years of combat across 2 major conflicts before March 27, 1999, and stealth aircraft have flown thousands of combat sorties since then with no further combat losses. The lesson is more specific. Any technological advantage, no matter how sophisticated, has assumptions baked into it. And those assumptions can be found, studied, and exploited by an adversary patient enough to look for them. The aircraft was the Nighthawk. The missile was 40 years old. The man who fired it now bakes bread. The pilot who survived now writes letters to him. The missile was old. The thinking was not. If this analysis was useful, subscribe to Strategic Decoded. Every claim in this video is sourced in the description. Click through and verify anything you want.